Senator Zappone.
Thanks, Les Kerlick. Welcome, Minister. Welcome to the House. I want to begin my remarks by commending the leadership of Minister Riley, rooted in his determination to protect life during pregnancy, and to, as he said in the chamber yesterday, clarify to women what it is that they are legally entitled to. Taken at face value, it is quite astonishing that determination to achieve these two policy and legal objectives creates such controversy and conflict. But they do, and they have. And so Minister Riley required and received critical support from his cabinet colleagues, and in this regard I commend the Taoiseach and Taoiseach, as well as Minister White, Chairman Jerry Buttimer, and all members of the Health Committee, who robustly represented all sides of the debate, and I think all of them were faithful to their duties of lawmakers. I want to especially thank Senator Van Turnout for keeping us all, members of her group, so closely informed of what was going on in the context of the committee. Senator Bocek, when you were a student being threatened with prison, I was teaching ethics in Trinity College, and I want to thank you for keeping those of us who are teaching ethics out of our ivory towers. Women need to be listened to. They need to be believed, said Dr. Rona Mahoney in this chamber when she gave evidence to lawmakers. She also asked, what is a substantial risk to life? And she answered, the interpretation of substantial risk is not the same for all people. The mother's opinion is key. The Supreme Court's decision in Attorney General versus X requires three things to be established before an abortion can be administered. First of all, that there is a risk to the life of the pregnant woman. Secondly, that as a matter of probability, that risk to life can only be averted by termination of the pregnancy. And thirdly, that the fetus is not viable or on the cusp of viability. In my view, the determination of a matter of probability must take account of the pregnant woman's view. What kind of society would not do that? Women are and ought to be viewed as primary agents in decisions about sexuality and reproduction. Recently, I tweeted that women are moral agents. Several people tweeted back, what does that mean? My response, women have the capacity to make ethical decisions, or something of that notion in 140 characters. Furthermore, I believe that our laws always must create room for women to exercise that ethical capacity. Women are embodied moral agents, not simply disinterested and detached observers. So women's knowing through their bodies is a prime source for ethical decision-making. It is not the only source, but indeed it is a prime source. No culture has yet been found in which conscience is not recognized as a fact, and it has always been viewed as integral to ethics, a functional guide for action, a capacity for ethical evaluation. But it is not enough to invoke conscience simply because one feels strongly about something or spontaneously judges that a certain action is the morally correct one. Sincerity alone is not sufficient. The conscience which most fully carries moral authority and to which one can appeal is the conscience which is continually self-critical, aware of the dangers of ignorance, bias, prejudice, selfishness, ignorance, arrogance, and self-sufficiency. Pregnant women have such a capacity and can and do exercise this capacity in the process of human reproduction. What is the intention of the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Bill 2013? As outlined in the bill's memo, the main purpose is to restate the general prohibition on abortion in Ireland while regulating access to lawful termination of pregnancy in accordance with the X case, the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights in A&B&C versus Ireland. Its purpose is to confer procedural rights on a woman who believes she has a life-threatening condition so that she can have certainty as to whether she requires this treatment or not. And in my view, the bill before us achieves these intentions. As outlined yesterday with a deeply reflective and articulate response, our leader, Senator Cummins, detailed the impact of the legal vacuum surrounding our termination laws. and argued that this bill will put in place a legal framework that can effectively close those gaps. We do have a legal vacuum. It is my view, having listened to or read the evidence presented to the Oireachtas, that a risk to life emanating from the possibility of suicide is a risk to life, and that the pregnant woman's interpretation of how this risk to life can be averted must be a prime consideration in subsequent decision-making to terminate or not. I think that the bill before us allows for this, though I must say I am persuaded by Senator Van Turnhout's rationale that sections 7 and 9 should have been merged, and I am aware of medical and legal rationale for this. There are many things that the bill does not do, as outlined by deputies and senators. But one of the prime things that the bill does not do is this. It does not challenge adequately a flawed human rights analysis operative in both past and current abortion debates. This human rights analysis presents the abortion decision as a competitive antagonism between an abstract holder of rights, the fetus or the unborn, and the pregnant woman. This view says that we have two equal and in every respect same rights holders that are in a competitive contest for survival. Is the unborn a person constitutionally? I do not think so. I recognize that taking on this issue is outside the confines of this bill, but I believe that these are the debates ahead of us and that we stand on firmer ground to have qualitative debates because of this bill. What this bill also does not do is legislate for termination of fatal fetal abnormalities. The government has argued that it is only obliged to deal with the issues related to the European Convention, the implementing of the A, B, and C judgment, and the X case, and that it is not obligated to go any further. Obligated by whom or what, I ask? Why is this an issue for another day? While it may be for another day in light of political strategy and tactics, I do not agree that it is for another day in light of ethical considerations and international human rights obligations. What are the ethical considerations? If it is the case that the pregnant woman is an embodied moral agent and that her life circumstances, social and economic conditions, as well as physical and mental health are key sources for an ethical decision, that means a good decision, why won't our law allow for this now? My understanding is that the state itself has argued that fatal fetal abnormalities could be legislated for within the confines of the existing constitutional restriction. And as Deputy Daley pointed out in the other House, if our constitutional provision and protection equates the life of women with that of the unborn, and if there is no life to protect, the constitutional protection does not exist. What are the international human rights obligations? As pointed out by the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, recent case law from the European Court of Human Rights on the issue of reproductive rights is relevant to us here. A number of cases relating to Poland indicates that the Council of Europe's states are obliged to ensure that women seeking lawful terminations are not exposed to inhuman and degrading treatment, contrary to Article 3 of the Convention on Human Rights. The ICCL's view is that the current treatment of women with pregnancies involving a defined set of fatal fetal abnormalities would be covered by this. So I cannot make rational ethical sense of omitting procedural rights for women in these instances. Of course, should the law allow for this, not all pregnant women will choose to terminate in this circumstance, but some would and should be allowed to do so. And so I'll be supporting an amendment put forward by my colleagues, Senator Mary Louise O'Donnell and Fiach McNeill, to include this in the bill. In conclusion, I do have another prime concern about this bill. Others have spoken about Section 22 as well of the Act that states that it shall be an offense to intentionally destroy unborn human life, and that in effect, those women who engage in termination in the Republic of Ireland are criminalized. Why is it that a termination when the mother's life is at risk does not equate with an intentional destruction of unborn human life? And that when termination is for other reasons, that it can only be defined as intentional destruction? There are many cases, many of them happening beyond these shores, when Irish women choose to terminate their pregnancy because of impoverished life circumstances or because of the violent context within which she becomes pregnant. To describe her action as intentionally destroying unborn human life is not necessarily true. Certainly not in all cases. Why is it that if the life of the mother is not at stake, termination is described as intentional, and if the life of the mother is at stake, it is described as legal? I do understand that this may be related to an article of the Constitution, but the effect of this is that we will continue to criminalize those women who cannot afford or cannot choose to travel for termination, even if she has exercised her moral agency to terminate, even if she has followed her conscience. There's great irony, I believe, in politicians arguing that they must follow their conscience in legislating, which, by the way, I agree with, but they want law that prohibits a pregnant woman to follow her conscience.
Margaret, Senator Paul Bradford.